Hello, friends, and thank you as always for visiting the Legend Sports Universe YouTube channel, Legend Sports Universe, where legends play forever. Wanted to give a mid-season update for year 2 of the Franchise Stars Football League before we head to the second half of the season. We'll go through the standings at this point in the year, the midway mark of our 14-week season. We'll go through the divisions. We'll also go through the leaderboards and then cover what went on at the trade deadline here in year 2 of the FSFL. We start things off in the AFC East, where the Buffalo Bills look to repeat as division champions from a year ago, and they are off to a terrific start. The Bills 6-1. Their offense has been potent. Their defense has been strong. They've allowed the fewest passing yards in the league. The defense kind of playing greater than the whole, greater than the sum of its parts there. As the Bills, the only loss they've suffered is to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Patriots have struggled particularly offensively, and Raymond Berry is in trouble as the coach of New England if they cannot get that righted. You'll see the Patriots have only allowed 100 points. Their defense has been very solid, but averaging barely over 10 points a game with all the weapons that they have. Tom Brady at quarterback, Stanley Morgan, Wes Welker, Rob Gronkowski at the tight ends. You've got a load of weapons there, and the offense for Raymond Berry's Patriots just not clicking to this point in the season. The New York Jets have been a bit of a surprise to this point. 3-4. They've been in virtually every game. They've had a couple of really impressive wins, including the week 1 comeback against the Dolphins, trailing 13-0 entering the fourth. Of course, as you can see, the Dolphins struggling mightily, and Don Shula's job might be in danger down there for Miami if they can't get something going. Back to the Jets. The Jets have gotten a great start from Curtis Martin. Jets are 5th in the league in rushing. Their run defense is 6th in the league. So they've been really solid. They've also gotten after the quarterback a bit. They're 2nd in the league in sacks behind only the Vikings. So an impressive job out of the Jets to this point, but still on the outside looking in, of course, in the FSFL playoff picture. Next, we'll shoot over to the East in the NFC, where the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles knotted at 5-2 atop the division. The Cowboys, of course, win the tiebreaker at this point, having defeated the Eagles in their first matchup of the season. Dallas has been very impressive. Roger Staubach has been really strong for them at the quarterback spot. Emmitt Smith has been held up a little bit, but he's gotten some backup from DeMarco Murray and Ezekiel Elliott. The Cowboys running the ball well. Dallas's big problem has been defense. They have let up a bunch of big plays. Their defense is only 20th in the league. They're in the bottom third of the league in both rushing and passing yards allowed. That is not a recipe for victory, particularly when you get to the postseason. They, of course, will play the Eagles again at the end of the season when we get back to divisional play over the final 3 weeks of the season. Check out the Redskins. The Redskins at 3-4. Their defense, 83 points allowed. Washington's defense ranks 5th in the NFC in allowing the fewest points. The only problem is their offense has gotten absolutely nothing going. 30th in the league in points scored at 59, less than 10 points a game. George Allen's offense has been stagnant, to say the least. And the Redskins putting a terrific performance from their defense to waste here in year 2. We will next take a look up north. We'll start in the AFC North, where the reigning division champion Cleveland Browns again sit on top, but not without concern. The Browns, yes, they're 5-2. They have scored the most points in the league to this point in the season. Bill Nelson just having a phenomenal year. Paul Warfield, Ozzie Newsome, Jarvis Landry. The offense has busted open a bunch of big plays throughout the year. But you'll see this is traditionally thought of as a smash mouth division, but none of the defenses have been great. Again, only 3 teams in the FSFL who are in the top 10 in points are also in the top 10 in defense. And you can see the Browns, not one of those with 151 points allowed, allowing more than 20 points a game. They're going to have to shore up that defense to try to stay on top in the AFC North. The Bengals have had a nice season, but the Bengals have much of the same problem, as do the Steelers. The Steelers at 3-4. The Steelers started off with some defensive struggles this year. Again, that carried over from last year where their defense underperformed. Offense is humming along now, and the defense has shown signs of righting the ship after a rough first few weeks of the season. If the Steelers can get that defense shored up, the Steelers can make a run at that division. The Baltimore Ravens, they have Ray Lewis and nothing else. Really, and Ray Rice. Ray Rice has been a very good running back for them, but the Ravens just do not have a lot at the moment, and they are 0-7, including handling the first victory for the Houston Texans. The Texans, of course, went winless in year one. They dropped 20 straight games before taking down the Ravens in week 5. We will bounce back over to the NFC, take a look at the NFC North, where the Green Bay Packers, underachievers a year ago, they missed the playoffs after being a team that was touted as a possible Super Bowl contender, Legends Bowl, of course, but a possible Legends Bowl contender, ended up missing the postseason completely. They have flipped with the Vikings who won this division a year ago. 1-6 this season. They haven't cracked the 100-point mark on the season yet through 7 games. Kirk Cousins has just been benched at quarterback as the Vikings. That defense, don't be thrown by the fact they're giving up almost 20 points a game. The Vikings defense has basically just not been able to get off the field. The offense has struggled mightily, and they're hoping that the change to Brad Johnson will get things going for Bud Grant's Viking squad. But right now, the Packers are the story there. The Packers at 5-2, the number 3 offense in the league. The defense, kind of middle of the pack, a little bit the top half, but top middle. But the Packers have gotten a sensational season from running back Jim Taylor, who leads the league in rushing. We'll get to that in a little bit. But Jim Taylor has been terrific. Bart Starr has been very good. They've got weapons at receiver led by James Lofton. The defense has been very solid. A nice, well balanced team, and the Packers could live up to the potential that was seen in them before this whole FSFL began. They might live up to that here in year 2. The Lions and the Bears just have no offense. The Bears defense is terrific. The Bears do not have enough offense. Bobby Douglas has struggled quite a bit at quarterback this season, but they don't feel that Bob Avellini is a huge upgrade. The Lions are an interesting squad because the Lions have done a lot right this year, but still sit at 3-4. Scott Mitchell, who had a miserable season in year 1 for the Lions, has been much better here in year 2. Willie Sims is running the ball well. Um, but again, they're kind of a mid-pack team. Their defense is solid. The secondary, 6 off balls. Night Train Lane and Lem Barney are terrific corners. Wayne Walker is a very good linebacker. They've got a lot of ability, but the Lions just can't seem to get over the hump and play with any kind of consistency. And that has hindered them from being able to make advances. They've still got the losing record here in year 2. Next, we head out to the AFC South. The defending FSFL champion Tennessee Oilers on top of the division once again, a 6-1 mark for the Oilers. The Bengals taking them down for their only defeat. The Oilers have been terrific. Earl Campbell, once again, amongst the leaders in rushing. Derrick Henry has run the ball well as well, supporting Campbell. George Blanda has had a very solid season, leading the league. 16 touchdown passes for Blanda. So kind of everything clicking a bit for the Oilers. They've given up a bunch of yardage defensively, but again, that's a function of them having leads most of the time. So the Oilers have played very, very well to this point. Them and the Colts in charge of the division. The Colts defense has been exceptional again. Their offense has lagged behind a little bit. You see there with them only with 123 points to this point. If you look at the Colts shakeup, how that has gone down this year, how they've shaken out this year. Burt Jones, 88.1 QB rating, a solid year for Jones, a little bit down from his numbers a year ago. Vidal Mitchell has run the ball well for them. Don McCaffrey's offense, though, has been a little bit close to the vest. There's not a lot of big play stuff going on offensively for them. They're going to have to open things up a little bit, I think, if they're going to try to. They should make the postseason, but if they're going to have any kind of a postseason run here in year two, I think the offense is going to have to kind of turn it up a notch. Trust Burt Jones, and he's got some talent there on the receivers. Willie Richardson, Roger Carr. Trust Jones to get the ball to his receivers and try to make some big plays. Jacksonville Jaguars have quietly put together a winning first half of the season at 4-3. They're coming off two straight really strong wins against, I mean, the Ravens stink, but they only allowed 3 points to the Ravens. They only allowed 10 to the Steelers, and they got beat by the Browns before that Ravens game. But the week before that, they manhandled the Bengals 30-3. So that is three of the last four games. This Jaguars defense has allowed 10 points or fewer. If that keeps up, the Jaguars can certainly find themselves in the playoff hunt. And obviously, the lowly Houston Texans, though they did get their first win in FSFL history, still bringing up the rear in that division. Mario Williams, J.J. Watt, not a whole heck of a lot else, although they have played a bit better since the switch at quarterback to Davis Mills from Brian Hoyer. We will head on over to the NFC South, and one of the two big surprises in the league this year, the Atlanta Falcons, on top of a division that was a shootout. Remember, three of these four teams made the playoffs a year ago. The Carolina Panthers were the team on the outside looking in last year. Panthers are in second at 5-2, but the Falcons at 6-1 have still allowed fewer than 100 points on the season. They have the number 4 run defense in the league. Claude Humphrey, Tommy Nobis leading the way defensively for the Falcons. Humphrey has 8 sacks. The rest of the defense only has 8 sacks as well, alongside of Humphrey. They would love to have gotten another pass rusher at the deadline. They were not able to do so. But overall, the Falcons have been really, really strong. They're controlling the ball a great deal. Matt Ryan has a very solid 88.5 rating. They haven't gone down the field a ton, but he's completing over 60% of his passes. He's only turned the ball over twice. Michael Turner has run the ball well to this point. He's averaging 4.6 a carry. Ryan's spreading the ball around between Roddy White, Alfred Jenkins, Jameer Miller, Michael Haynes. So he's got lots of weapons. It's been a short, effective passing game for Mike Smith's offense, and the Falcons just win the time of possession battle virtually every single week. And as a result, their defense isn't on the field that much. It's been effective when it has been, and that has them on top of the NFC South. Falling off this year, the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers defense has taken a step back. The offense has taken a step back as well. Jameis Winston fighting some. He's had a couple of really bad games. He's had a few really good games, but the Bucs just can't find any consistency. And the Saints are sitting there on the bubble at 4-3. Their defense has played very well. Their offense has been a bit run heavy for what you would expect a Sean Payton offense to be. George Rogers and Mark Ingram have both run the ball really well. And Drew Brees is playing well, but he's not throwing the ball with a lot of abundance. They haven't gone down the field a great deal. You wonder if their trade deadline pickup, and again, we'll get to the deadline stuff in a minute, but their acquisition of Keenan Allen from the San Diego Chargers, we'll see if that makes Brees and Peyton open up that offense a bit for the Saints in the second half of the season. As we head over to the AFC West, you'll remember I mentioned earlier on in this broadcast that only 3 teams in the FSFL have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense as well. The Buffalo Bills were the first of those. The second is the team that handed the Bills their only loss of the season, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs at 6-1, they have allowed only 66 points all season while scoring 175. That's the biggest differential in the league. The Chiefs have been great. Steve DeBerg is playing out of his mind. The quarterback is the second highest rated passer in the league this year. Remember, DeBerg started year 1 playing very well for the Chiefs and then struggled a bit in the second half for them. So he's going to try to avoid that this season, although he was not playing this well. Again, he's got his QB rating up over 100. The Berg has been terrific. He isn't making mistakes. He's not throwing picks. He has been accurate in Andy Reid's offense. He's getting great support on the ground from Priest Holmes. Um, the Chiefs are just doing a really, really nice job, but they have allowed the fewest rushing yards and the second fewest passing yards in the league. So if you're going to beat the Chiefs, you are going to have to possess the ball, you're going to have to control a clock, and you're going to have to win a slugfest with them. And keeping them off the scoreboard has been a chore so far this season. One team that did do it, the San Diego Chargers. Consider the fact that the Chiefs have the second most points in the league to this point, and that includes them being shut out by the Chargers. The Chargers beat them 10-0 in San Diego. Chargers have a winning mark despite not having scored 100 points yet this season. But they also haven't allowed 100 points yet. So we'll see which side gives for the Chargers. That offense has to step it up, or can the defense hold the fort for the duration? The Broncos, very similar to last year. The Broncos kind of a middle of the pack team in pretty much all aspects so far this season, except for the pass rush. They're third in the FSFL in sacks at this point. Actually, their defense has been really solid. Offensively, they have struggled a bit, particularly in the running game. Mike Anderson has not had a great year for them, and that has limited the Broncos a bit. But the story out there also, the Oakland Raiders, the division champs a year ago, remember, the Raiders were 10-0 at one point last season before they lost their first game. And then they suffered injuries down the stretch and were bounced in the postseason. But the Raiders' offense this year has just been abysmal. Ken Stabler, who had a great year in year one, has fallen on hard times here in year two. Marcus Allen has taken a step back, and the Raiders 2-5 and pretty much out of the playoff picture. We will wrap things up out in the NFC West for the biggest positive surprise and quite possibly the biggest negative surprise as well. We'll start with the positive, where the Arizona Cardinals, 5-2 on top of the NFC West. Again, teams with the top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. The Bills and the Chiefs are the first two. The Cardinals are third on that list. They've allowed the eighth fewest rushing yards in the league. That has been a huge get for them. They've allowed some passing yards, but they've had leads and significant leads virtually every week. They've allowed the ninth fewest points defensively in the league. They are sixth offensively in points scored. They've had a great infusion of talent here in year two. Otis Anderson is among the league leaders in rushing. And on the defensive side, Aeneas Williams bolstering the defensive side of the ball in the secondary. He's made a very good pair in the secondary with Patrick Peterson. And the Cardinals have taken advantage of the fact of the negative surprise in the NFC. The reigning NFC champion San Francisco 49ers are 3-4 and just finding ways to lose games. Their overall numbers don't look terrible, but still the 49ers are sitting at 3-4. They fell recently to the Eagles. I believe that was last week. And that was a week 7 result. Actually, no, I apologize. That was week 4. That was the start of that series of games. They fell 13-10 to the Eagles. They then held on and beat the Giants in overtime, 26-23. They then lost 7-3 in Washington to the Redskins. There is no way that 49ers offense with those weapons, with John Brody at quarterback, with Jerry Rice and Gene Washington and Dwight Clark and Frank Gore running the ball, should ever be held to 3 points. We talked before about the Redskins defense, but that's irrelevant to the situation. The 49ers cannot be held to 3. And then they lost 24-14 to the Cowboys in Dallas last week. So the Niners are having a real hard go right now. Again, they're 2 games out. They're certainly within striking distance of either the division or the wild card with a good second half. But they have to get their act together. And right now, they're tied with the Rams, who are reliving the greatest show on turf out there under Dick Vermeil. Kurt Warner firing the ball all over the place. The Rams have the most passing yardage in the league. Warner has been terrific, and Harold Jackson and Torrey Holt have been a dynamic combination at wideout for the Rams. So with that, we're going to move on. We'll take a look at a couple of the stat categories as we go down some of the leaders here in year two of the Franchise Stars Football League. Two numbers that are a little bit off, nothing terrible, but are a little bit off. The rushing totals are a little bit high. Um, Guys are carrying the ball a little bit more than they should, and the subs are a little bit less. And I also made a slight tweak to speed ratings um, to handle the sacks issue, which I had spoken about previously that we dealt with a little bit in year one. I cut down defensive lineman speed a little bit, and that's worked great in regard to the sacks issue. But I had to counter that by cutting the speed of the running backs down a little bit, and that happened after week three because I noticed that the running totals were a little bit high. So you'll see the rushing leaders right now are a little bit high. Again, nothing completely kind of whack or cartoony, but a little bit higher than what I wanted them. And those have kind of settled in nicely over the last 4 weeks. So the end of season numbers should be right around where I want them. I also do not have interception leaders here. There were not enough interceptions being thrown early in the season. That has also been tweaked, but that number is still a little bit low. I think Lem Barney is the only person with three, and then there's a whole bunch of guys with two and a whole bunch of guys with one. So I don't have the interception leaders posted here. But anyway, more minutia that maybe more than you care about, but I figured I would touch on those things before getting to the leaderboards here. We will start off with our quarterback leaders, and leading the way at this point, Bill Nelson from the Browns, who I have noted Bill Nelson, that the league wants to make Bill Nelson pee in a cup at this point because he has been sensational for the Browns. Again, Bernie Kosar was the starter for the Browns last season. He struggled. Nelson took over midway through. And Nelson's been exceptional. 117.3 QB rating. He leads the league in yards per attempt. Just the Browns have gotten a lot of big plays, deep threats. Paul Warfield has broken several plays loose over the course of the season. Jim Brown out of the backfield has busted a few. Jarvis Landry, Ozzie Newsome. So the Browns' offense is just humming. Nelson has thrown 4 picks, but still the yards per attempt and the completion percentage up in the high 60s, very high for this league. This league aims to be an average of around 60. This is designed to be more late 80s, early 90s kind of football. Is what we were going for here. But Nelson is far surpassing that. He's been terrific. Steve DeBerg, as we mentioned, is having a great year. So not two names that you would figure you would see at the top of the list here. Then the league starts to settle in with a bit more familiarity. Roger Staubach of the Cowboys, John Brody, who was the QB rating leader a year ago for the 49ers, Ben Roethlisberger, Ken Anderson of the Browns, Drew Brees of the Saints. Again, Brees has been very good. The Saints just haven't thrown the ball a ton to this point, uncharacteristic of Sean Payton offense. But they've gotten such great work out of George Rogers and Mark Ingram. They've been trying to grind it out a bit. George Blanda, as we mentioned, leads the league in touchdown passes for the Oilers. He's in there eighth. Jim Hart of the Cardinals. He's been key to their success at ninth, and Jalen Hurts of the Eagles round out our QB rating top tens so far here in year two of the FSFL. Flip the screen to our rushing leaders, and the Green Bay Packers, Jim Taylor leading the way. Taylor, of course, led a league in rushing in real life and MVP season that he had for the Packers. But Taylor leading the league here. Taylor had back-to-back games early on in the season of like 160 and 175. That really kind of blew his number up. But Taylor has been terrific for a Packers offense that, again, has been humming on all cylinders for Coach Mike McCarthy to this point. LaShawn McCoy, I realize his name is spelled wrong, it's Lesean. But regardless of the spelling, LaShawn McCoy is second in the league in rushing. O.J. Simpson, Otis Anderson, the terrific rookie for the Cardinals, is fourth. Earl Campbell slides in there at fifth. Fred Taylor has had a great season so far for the Jaguars. He is at sixth. Curtis Martin. Martin, of course, the longest play from scrimmage in FSFL history, going 98 yards in week one against the Dolphins for a touchdown there. That certainly helped Martin's total as he sits there in the seventh slot. Jim Brown, the reigning FSFL most valuable player and the league's leading rusher from year one, is there at eight. Brown struggled out of the gate this year. He did not have much in the way of numbers through, I think it was like 4 weeks, and he started to crank it up over the last 3 weeks here in the first half of year two to get himself into the top 10. Priest Holmes of the Chiefs and James Brooks having a fine season for the Bengals. That rounds out the top 10 rushing leaders here in the FSFL. Receptions leaders to this point in the season, and it's the Rams' Harold Jackson. The Rams, the only team with two receivers in the top 10. You'll see Torrey Holt down there at sixth. But again, the Rams, the highest, most potent passing attack in the league. Kurt Warner has been on fire, and Harold Jackson and Torrey Holt have been the beneficiaries of that for the Rams. Mark Carrier having a really good season. He's become Jameis Winston's favorite target down there in Tampa, despite the disappointing season for the Bucks. Plaxico Burress, Lionel Taylor having another good year. Taylor was excellent for the Broncos in year one. James Lofton of the Packers tied with Taylor and Burress there, tied for third in receptions. And Holt, as we mentioned, Tyreek Hill, who leads the league in touchdowns to this point. Tyreek Hill of the Chiefs is in the seven slot. Mickey Schuler, Jets tight end. Schuler has been very good. Ken O'Brien has found a nice rhythm with Mickey Schuler for New York. Schuler is in there, tied in the eighth slot with the Cardinals, Jackie Smith. The always steady and consistent Jackie Smith in the top 10 gets rounded out by Willie Richardson, who has kind of replaced Roger Carr as Burt Jones's favorite target for the Colts in Indianapolis. Two very prominent names, a reception off of cracking the leaderboard, Jerry Rice of the 49ers and Michael Irvin of the Cowboys, just off the list at 36 receptions apiece. We'll get to a couple of defensive categories as to not ignore those guys. And our tackles leader is always a stat that I enjoy because there's always some great names on this list. Patrick Willis continues to lead the league in tackles. Willis led the league in tackles a year ago as well. He is on top here with 103 to this point. The outstanding Luke Ketchley for the Panthers. Again, Luke Ketchley, if you're not overly familiar with him, his NFL career was short. But Ketchley was a multiple time All Pro, and he retired young. I think he was 26, 27, maybe 28, but I don't think he was any older than that. He retired because of concussions, and he worried about the impact of concussions on his life outside of football. So Ketchley retired early, and that was really the start of the league starting to take concussions seriously and the concussion protocols and all that kind of stuff because they lost an all-pro at the top of his game who decided that he was concerned about the effects of the concussions. That'll be Luke Ketchley's legacy on the NFL. EJ Jr. Is third in tackles, always one of my favorite guys from the 80s. Terrific linebacker for the Cardinals. Ray Nitschke is in there, tied for fourth with Bobby Wagner, the always steady linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. Zach Thomas, Ray Lewis of the Ravens. Again, Lewis kind of an island unto himself down there in Baltimore. And then two guys back to back on the linebackers for that. We talked about the Buccaneers defense has been really solid, and the offense has kind of been letting them down to this point. Dewey Selman and Hardy Nickerson both cracked the top 10 in tackles for the Bucks. And the Jets are kind of a surprise entry on this. He was a very solid linebacker, but not somebody who I would figure would be in the top 10 in this league. But David Harris finds his way into the top 10 in tackles for the Jets with 85. Close it out with the FSFL sack leaders. And just because the sacks issue, again, last season, that was a fight that went on through the season and was rectified, midway through the year. But the inflated sack numbers early on in the FSFL, just because that situation has been corrected, doesn't mean that nobody is racking up the sacks still. Teams are only averaging 2.5 to 3 sacks on average, which is where it should be. But you still got some guys issuing dominant performances, and that list this year is led by Richard Seymour. Seymour has 12 sacks for the Patriots to this point. Seymour has been terrific. Again, that Patriots defense is getting the job done. They've just got to figure out what is wrong offensively and get that fixed. They have been abysmal in the red zone, for one thing. Um, but again, Brady hasn't been himself, but the offensive play calling, some of that has been suspect, and just nobody on the offensive side of the ball for New England is having the year that they should be. However, Price having a really nice year for the Broncos. He and the Vikings' Carl Eller 10 sacks. Eller had 7 sacks through the first 4 games, so his pace has slowed a little bit, but still nobody's going to have any problem with a guy having 10 sacks through 7 games. Miles Garrett of the Browns has 8.5. Claude Humphrey for the Falcons has 8. Howie Long with 7.5. Alan Page, also of the Vikings, he and Eller have just been an incredible combination for a Minnesota team that leads the league in sacks. Page has 7, as does Pat Swilling of the New Orleans Saints, and then 11 different players in the league tied with 6 sacks as we reach the midpoint of year 2. So the last order of business here for our midseason recap is we're going to go through the 17 deals that went down at the trade deadline here in year 2 of the Franchise Stars Football League. I developed this system with the assistance of ChatGPT / Google Gemini. I was going to walk through the process here in this video in addition to doing the trade deadline trades, but I'm just going to talk about the trades in this one. I'm going to do the ChatGPT stuff in a separate video and go over how that process went because it was pretty interesting and it was a lot of fun and it came out really, really well. So I'm going to kind of walk through that a little bit as an under the hood kind of thing in a video I'll do in the next week or so. So we'll open up here. The Packers and the Niners making a deal, the defending NFC champion Niners, and the team that may very well be the best team in the NFC at this point, the Green Bay Packers. San Francisco disappointing 3-4 so far in the first half, and their very talented secondary, Merton Hanks, Eric Wright. Um, Right, Hicks, plenty of talent there, but they have just not played very well this season. Alexander, a surplus corner for a strong Green Bay secondary that has Ken Ellis and Herb Adderley. So Alexander was expendable. That should help the Niners while the Packers get Samuel, who's been buried on the Niners' deep receiving corps as another weapon for the FSFL's number 4 passing offense. He will work with Max McGee and James Lofton to boost the offense for the Packers, who also pick up a 5th-round pick in that deal. Here's one, the biggest surprise in the league this year, the Arizona Cardinals. And the Cardinals just suffered a loss. Terrific linebacker Jameer Miller. And their response was to make a deal with the Bills, who are very deep at linebacker. They sent a 3rd-round pick to Buffalo for Cornelius Bennett. Biscuit kind of part of a very deep linebacking core there with the Bills, with Matt Milano and Shane Conlon and Bryce Paup is in there. Like Stratton is in there as well. So they were able to move Bennett, who was not really happy with a fairly limited playing time role in Buffalo. He will get to plug right into Miller's spot with the Cardinals. Again, Bills dealing with strength. They stock up on a draft pick for next season, and the Cardinals plug a hole immediately there, which will be a big thing for them. I expect Bennett to play very well for the Cardinals. The Bills at 6-1, the Cardinals at 5-2. Two teams that look like they're destined for the FSFL postseason. Move next to a defensive back swap as the LA Rams trade safety OJ Ottaway and a 5th-round pick to the Chicago Bears for corner Benny McCray. The Rams 3-4. They got the 30th ranked pass defense in the league. They pick up McCray, who's going to serve as kind of a nickel back, a corner behind Leroy Irvin and Todd Light. McCray, a reliable corner. He won't be a starter, but he will get playing time out there in LA. Again, the Rams secondary, despite some talent, they have been torched repeatedly. Um, they're putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback too, but they've been giving up the big play. They've got the best passing offense in the league, but again, the 30th ranked pass defense, and that's how the Rams are getting themselves into shootouts. The Bears just need a lot of help. So the draft pick will certainly help the Bears try to improve for next year. They're at 2-5 right now. They're loaded with natural corners who they've got playing out of position. So now they get a rotational safety in Ottaway. who should help that secondary a little bit. Not so much for this year, but that combined with the pick will help the Bears going forward. Interesting trade here for two teams involved in the playoff picture. The New Orleans Saints trade talented guard Andrews Peace and safety Brett Maxey to the Chargers for wide receiver Keenan Allen. This is a potentially big deal for the Saints. The Saints, again, both of these teams are 4-3. Allen, a potentially huge playmaker. And the Saints' passing attack has been pretty stagnant. Breeze has played well. For one thing, Sean Payton just hasn't thrown the ball as much as one would expect. Part of that, just they don't have a great crew of wide receivers out there. Danny Abramowitz, solid, but the best of a fairly mediocre lot. Allen immediately becomes an impact player for that Saints offense. Um, he's been trapped behind Wes Chandler and Charlie Joyner out in San Diego. The Chargers, using their wide receiver surplus, they bolster their offensive line. 29th in rushing, rookie Paul Lowe has struggled mightily, and the secondary, which is kind of mid-tier, Brett Maxey will help that squad out for San Diego. Up next, the Bills in trading action again, and again it's for a draft pick. This time it's a fourth round pick they'll pick up from the Cowboys in exchange for defensive tackle Kyle Williams. Cowboys at 5-2, a targeted investment here in run defense to get Kyle Williams to try to help Bob Lilly stabilize things. The Cowboys defense has been very porous this season, and that could be their downfall come playoff time. Bills already deep at defensive tackle, despite their run defense only kind of being in the middle of the pack to this point. Williams is kind of a non-essential asset for them, and he gets turned into another mid-round draft pick without weakening the starting lineup there in Buffalo. So a deal that makes sense on both sides. Next, we have a deal with a team that's probably been the best team in football so far this season, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs deal with the Giants here, dealing a second round pick, which is the highest draft pick that was dealt here at the trade deadline. They deal a second round pick to the Giants. The Giants certainly need help at 2-5. And that pick lets them Jason Pierre Paul. The Chiefs, as great as their defense has been, Eric Thomas and Chris Jones each have 3 sacks. The rest of the Chiefs have 4 combined. So Pierre Paul can kind of help on the line, perhaps kind of draw a little bit of pressure away from Jones to enhance him and get Derek Thomas involved as well, kind of bolster that pass rush, which is really the lone missing component so far for Kansas City this season. Again, they're a championship caliber team at this point. And the Giants, again, a premium second round pick they can use to address a host of issues in New York. Move forward here, trade the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle pretty much done, 2-5. But they pick up some help for the secondary in Mike Wagner. All it cost them is a low round pick. Again, Seattle trying to build ahead. At 2-5, they're not going to be a threat this year. This is an interesting deal, though, for the Steelers. The Steelers at 3-4, they gained some late draft capital for a depth piece. It doesn't really cost them anything in the secondary. They've got Troy Polamalu back there. They've got Mel Blount back there. You've got Minka Fitzpatrick back there. So Wagner wasn't playing a huge amount anyway. So in the grand scheme, this is a fairly minor deal. Wagner will help the Seahawks more than I think that low pick will help the Steelers. But again, it's just an opportunity for the Steelers to pick up somebody down the line, a fairly minor trade deadline deal. We'll stick with the Seahawks here. This time they deal with probably the league's biggest disappointment here in year 2, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, who won the NFC North a year ago, are 1-6 here in year 2. They have not been able to run the ball well despite a pair of solid backs in Michael Bennett and Dalvin Cook. They have just not gotten anything going this year. Obviously, we've talked about the Vikings' depth at defensive line. They have plenty of it, so they could afford to give up Kevin Williams, who will help a weak front 7 in Seattle. But in return, the Vikings get Chris Warren here, and this may very well be a steal. Warren has been phased out a bit in Seattle with the draft of Marshawn Lynch last year. So Lynch, the rookie this year, has gotten the bulk of the load. Warren goes to Minnesota. Bennett will probably still get some carries. My guess is that Dalvin Cook becomes the odd man out in Minnesota, but Warren will get the heavy reps for the Vikings. Again, a look probably more towards next season than this one, as the horrendous 1-6 start for the Vikings probably has them looking to next season. In my opinion, one of the more intriguing deals of this trade deadline, the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Cleveland Browns. The Bucks at 2-5 seem like they're going to miss the playoffs this season, but they deal a low pick here. It's only a fifth round pick. And they deal to the Browns to pick up Greg Pruitt. Pruitt, of course, is the change of pace back to the reigning most valuable player, Jim Brown. But Pruitt is brought in here for the Bucks, and we'll see how they implement Pruitt. He's certainly going to take over return duties from Adam Humphrey. Pruitt's been a very dangerous returner here in the FSFL. But James Wilder is a solid back. The offensive line in Tampa has been pretty weak, but Wilder can run the ball. He doesn't have great numbers this year, but I feel that's more of a function of the offensive line than of Wilder himself. But bringing in Pruitt, we'll see if Pruitt splits the carries with Wilder. They're two very different backs. So we'll see if Tampa tries to get a two-headed monster thing going there, or if they've brought in Pruitt to try to be the spark to the running game himself. That's going to be an interesting one. For the Browns, now they have no real solid backup to Jim Brown, and you like being able to rest Brown when you can. Eric Metcalf will probably be the next in line to take some secondary carries from Brown. But dealing away Pruitt there, I think the Browns may end up regretting. It's nice to have that change of pace back. It's nice to be able to get Brown out of a game for a bit and spell him a little bit. So I think the Browns may end up regretting that move. I like Greg Pruitt. He does fumble the ball a bit, but I think Pruitt is a very good weapon to have for a very solid Cleveland Browns squad. LA Rams pick up safety Tom Myers from the New Orleans Saints for a fifth round draft pick. The Rams had dealt OJ Ottaway in the trade to the Bears that brought Benny McCray in. So now they replace Ottaway with a different safety and Tom Myers. Myers is a very solid safety. He'll fit into that Rams secondary. But again, the Rams just allowing a bunch of yardage this year, just trying to kind of rearrange the deck chairs in that secondary. So they've got plenty of talent back there. Nolan Cromwell, Todd White, Leroy Irvin. They just have been susceptible to giving up the big play. Their linebackers haven't been particularly good in coverage either, which has hurt them there. But they don't trade for a linebacker. They simply have swapped out a couple of one defensive back to bring in two and dealt a couple of low-level draft picks to get that done on their end. Arizona Cardinals, who we talked about earlier on with their super impressive start at 5-2, they reinforced their secondary, acquiring Pac-Man Jones for a draft pick. And Jones will give them a very capable nickel defender to complement a stellar pair of corners, rookie Aeneas Williams and Patrick Peterson. Sam Weish has the Bengals playing well. They're at 4-3. They take advantage of their surplus at the corners to bolster their draft capital, as most think they're probably a year away from being a real threat in the AFC. But don't tell that to Sam Weish. Weish thinks the Bengals can be a disruptor this season here in year two. Strange bedfellows indeed here for this next deal. The Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Redskins strike a deal where the Cowboys at 5-2, their linebacking core, with the exception of Chuck Howley, has really kind of been considered their weak spot, although Brady James has played very well this season. But the Cowboys deal from a supreme strength. Dallas's offensive line depth is absolutely exceptional. When they trade Eric Williams, who's caught behind Rayfield Wright at that right tackle spot, Eric Williams immediately helps the Redskins. Cowboys in return get Ryan Kerrigan, who can certainly fortify a front seven. Again, Dallas's defense has significantly underperformed this season. Kerrigan will immediately step into a starting role there and try to help the Dallas defense kind of steady the ship a bit. Dallas's offense has been solid, but they're going to need that defense to play better than they've played this year to be a real threat come postseason time. Eric Williams, again, he's not one of the original cogs of the Washington Redskins fame, but Eric Williams will immediately help there. despite the fact that the Redskins are dealing with the loss of John Riggins, so Terry Allen will reap the benefits of that for now. Certainly, quarterback Jason Campbell will be very happy to have Eric Williams protecting his right side. Next, we've got a deal between the Atlanta Falcons, the surprising Atlanta Falcons, 6-1, dealing with the Steelers. The Falcons have gotten eight. Their defense has been terrific, and they've got 8 sacks from Claude Humphrey so far, but nobody else on the roster has more than two. The dealing of a fourth-round pick here to pick up Gilden will help that. Jason Gilden, an effective pass rusher from the Steelers. He had 2 sacks in a limited role with the Steelers. He's going to be turned loose with the Falcons and try to provide another bit of bolstering the pass rush there for Atlanta. But I mean, Atlanta at 6-1, currently on top of the NFC, and they are flying high as we head into the second half of the season. So the New Orleans Saints with a third deal here, and the Saints really reshuffling that secondary. At 4-3, the Saints on the bubble for the playoff picture. They pick up Harrison Smith from the Minnesota Vikings. That instantly elevates the secondary's toughness, their range. Smith is going to pair well with Sammy Knight to form a very, very solid safety duo. Remember, they had gotten rid of Tom Myers. They had also dealt Brett Maxey away here at the deadline. So the Saints really changing things up in the secondary. The disappointing Vikings, again, we touched on that earlier. They had Lance Moore here, and Moore, his 24 catches so far this season would be second on the Vikings behind Randy Moss. Brant Johnson, who has just replaced Kirk Cousins after Cousins has been benched, he's got plenty of weapons. And Lance Moore will certainly add to that. But it's probably too late for the defending division champion Vikings to recover this season. But Moore, certainly a very fine, talented receiver to get into the fold in Minnesota. Perhaps the most puzzling pick of the deadline, and again, I'm not going to get too into the whole ChatGPT thing, which I think worked great once I worked out the system with it. But this one is a questionable deal just because it doesn't really help. The Patriots, their defense has been excellent. The Patriots' offense has struggled, and the deal to help the offense certainly makes sense. But tight end isn't one of their problems. Rob Gronkowski is terrific. Russ Francis is a really solid second option. And while Raymond Berry's squad is having major problems offensively, the pickup of Vernon Davis here for a fourth round pick um, doesn't really fill a need for the Patriots. It felt like there's something else that they possibly could have done in dealing a pick that would have bolstered them more. Maybe another receiver, maybe a little bit of offensive line help. Brady's been under quite a bit of pressure. Um, just Vernon Davis just becomes another tight end in a team that's already pretty solid at the position. Barry's job status is very tenuous. Tom Brady's regression this season after being the top rated passer in the AFC a year ago certainly has been stunning. But I don't see there being anything about this move that helps Barry and the Patriots fix their offensive struggles. We follow that trade up with a deal that makes perfect sense, particularly for the Cowboys. The Cowboys send wide receiver Lance Rensel and a fifth round pick to the Detroit Lions for very talented corner Darius Slay. The Lions deep at the corners, obviously, with Lem Barney and Night Train Lane, who both have been terrific. So they're dealing from a strength there. Lance Rensel provides another good offensive weapon for Scott Mitchell. Mitchell has played very well this year. And Rensel is a very solid receiver. He missed a couple weeks with injury, but he is healthy now, and he'll fit in with Herman Moore and Golden Tate and a talented crop of receivers out in Detroit. But again, Dallas's pass defense, we've touched on it already in this stream. Dallas's pass defense has been terrible. Slay immediately helps that. He'll set up opposite Cornell Green. The corners, Don Bishop will move to a reserve role at the corner, and Slay and Green will be one of the top corner tandems in the league all of a sudden. It's funny, given that Mitchell has, and again, Mitchell has played well, but the Lions' offensive line has not been great, and they have depth at wide receiver. If the Lions had made this deal with the Cowboys for Eric Williams, who went to the Redskins in the Ryan Kerrigan deal. That deal would have probably made a bit more sense as far as a benefit to Detroit, as far as protecting Mitchell and helping out the run game as well. But the Williams trade happened first, and this is what the Lions and Cowboys ended up striking. But a Williams for Slay trade would have been a perfect match for both teams. In a similar fashion to the Saints, the Rams have been trying to kind of remake themselves in the secondary as well. We talked about that earlier, and the pickup of Benny McRae from the Bears helped let the Rams set free Dexter McClean at the corner. And McClean and a late draft pick, a fifth round pick, head to the Arizona Cardinals for running back David Johnson. Johnson, who's been relegated to the backup in Arizona with rookie Otis Anderson's emergence. Now Johnson will get an opportunity to possibly take some carries away from Lawrence McCutcheon, making Wendell Tyler the odd man out in the Rams backfield. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here with Johnson, what role he plays in LA, and also now what happens with Otis Anderson not having a high level back to take some of the load off of his shoulders down the stretch for a surprising Arizona team. That will wrap things up here for the year two midseason update for the Franchise Stars Football League. Came in under an hour, which was my goal. We've gone through the standings, the leaders, the trade deadline. Again, I'll do a separate stream about the trade deadline process and building that whole mechanism within ChatGPT. It was a lot of fun to do, and I'm really happy with the results. And I think people who kind of like this hobby, and particularly the kind of projects that I do here on the Legend Sports Universe, will enjoy that stream. So I'll put that one together hopefully at some point during the week. But for now, we wrap up the mid-season update and we ready for the second half of year two of the Franchise Stars Football League. The game of the week for week 8, Bills and Eagles coming up next. Huge thanks for joining. Bang that like button. Subscribe if you haven't as of yet. And most importantly, be good to each other. And we'll talk soon.